diverse thinking to the podcast from a generational aspect.
Change doesn't have to be overwhelming. Once you've made change, your mind knows how to make change.
At any stage of our lives, we are unstoppable. Well, hello and welcome. Welcome to Unstoppable from Vision One High Performance Group. My name is Lori Moen, and this podcast is for you, a business leader, a business owner, someone who may perhaps feel a little bit stuck trying to navigate a critical change, maybe struggling to realize your full potential. And that's what this Unstoppable podcast is really all about. There are three of us here today with our guest. On the younger side, Tyler Bonahum.
How you doing, Lori?
I'm doing great. And finally, we have Michelle Bonahum. Hi, Michelle.
Good morning. Good morning.
Michelle's the founder of Vision One High Performance Group and the author of Unstoppable, which is the book that shares the 7 simple steps to get unstuck, make the big change, and unlock your potential. And today we're excited to have with us our guest, Meridee Rilen. She is the founder of Affinity Psychological Services. And it's an amazing practice that serves clients providing compassionate, solution-oriented mental health therapy. She listened to her heart. She listened to her clinicians and her clients. So Meridee, talking with you earlier was such a joy. And the story of your grounding in your own personal mission and knowing it is so inspirational. And I'm excited for our audience to learn more today.
I'm excited to be here. It's awesome to be in the presence of other people who are successful and ambitious and amazing and wanting to tell people's stories. And I can totally get behind that. So
that's great. That's great. And your story, what I found so enlightening was as we were talking and you were sharing your journey of discovering private practice and how that was the only way you could navigate your life, making your life by design. And now realizing that's what you really do for your clinicians. It seems like, is you let them live their life by design.
Yeah, it's totally true. There's a part of putting into practice what you preach with clients that I recognized years ago. Aiming for what's best for you and what your ideal is and not thinking that it's impossible. But if you know for certain that you need something for yourself, for your family, and figuring out like, okay, well, there's probably a path to get there. So it takes big steps sometimes and trust in yourself and each other that it's going to work out on the other side.
So tell us your story. Like, I just am so amazed with the business that you've grown. And so tell our audience a little bit about what got you started and then talk about the growth and your model around growth.
Yeah, there's like a personal story and there's a business story that are like a little bit parallel, but came back from maternity leave after having my first kid, and my first day or week in the office, they said, we're actually going to need you to do a second evening. And so you're going to be at this location for a second evening a week. Like they really love you over there. And I was so flattered and I loved working with those clients, and I already lined up my nanny and it was an hour commute from my house. And, we'd already done all the planning for that. And I just realized in that moment, like if I'm going to be the kind of parent that I want to be, a partner that I want to be, I think I'm going to need to go into private practice, which I coached other people into private practice. I encouraged them into private practice in order to have that sustainable work-life ratio. And then at some point, someone suggested that, it sounded easy when I said it, but it was hard to actually do it on their side. And what would it be like to do that for other people? And that was sort of the origins of bringing people on. And then there's been a whole evolution of what that's looked like I can't even say working for me because I don't think about it that way. I really think of it as working with me. Having a contractor model is very popular in the outpatient mental health world. Those were sort of the two models. You could like work at a hospital and get a salary, or an agency and get a salary, or you could go be a contractor. I started out that way too in the beginning. Summer of 2020, post George Floyd, did a lot of like DEI and hiring consults and coaching. And one of the things that they had me look at was when you interview clinicians of color, and they didn't come, where did they go? Is there anything that they had in common? And so I looked back at those interview notes, I looked at where they landed, and they landed in employment models. And I have no idea, correlation does not equal causation. But that is one of the pieces that I thought about was, in my mind, I was empowering people to like, go find the best health insurance for you, go set up your own retirement. And a little bit, it was like not taking my own advice because as I mentioned to Lori earlier, when I was self-employed, I did not have a retirement plan that I was contributing to. It's not that I couldn't figure it out. It's that it was something extra and I just didn't do it. And tomorrow was always a better day to do it than today. And so one of the things that I really thought was, how can I keep everything that's great about a contractor model and the things that people want and the reason that they're leaving a hospital, an agency, or whatever, and give people the security of employment, figuring out your health insurance options for you, the setting up a retirement plan for you, providing, CEU money for you to make it easier to keep your license and all of those pieces. Short-term disability so that you can go on maternity leave, because therapists are not exclusively, but largely a young female industry. So I think we have 4 people on maternity leave right now. That's probably true at almost any given time. How do we make those pieces easier? And so trying to meld the independence that people want from contractor / self-employment with the supports of employment. And I will tell you, when I started talking to people and telling them I'm going to switch over to employees, they were like, oh my gosh, good for you. You're going to be able to have so much more control now. I had 2 lawyers and 2 accountants say those words to me. And I was like, oh, so that's what I'm going to be up against, is that people think if I become an employee, I'm giving up control, which is not what I want at all for our clinicians here. I'm really doing it so that legally I can give you the benefits of employment. Again, are totally figure outable, but not everyone wants to figure that stuff out. That has always been, like, I tell everyone, like, we make our decisions filtered through, what does this look like in a private practice? Now, what that means also is there are organizations that serve the needs of a client. Hospitals have to serve the need of the client. If you call and you need services, that hospital has to provide you services. That is great for the client. Sometimes it sucks for the clinicians. Our mandate is to the clinicians, not to the clients. And that
which
sucks
is so unique.
Yeah.
But it sucks for clients. So I am supporting our admins a lot, because clients are mad that we don't have evening appointments available, that we don't have appointments for kids and families, because we won't require people to see those clients at those times just because a client requests it. And there are places that client can go and have that experience. And so that's their expectation. And so then they're mad. And I totally get that. And as a consumer, I get it, because when I try and make my own appointments or appointments for my kids, like, I get it. I want to be able to have that. But my mandate is taking care of the clinicians. And so if they tell me I can't do that work anymore, I can't work those hours anymore, I don't want to do that, okay, I'm going to be grateful for the work you are willing to do and not expect you to do the work that you don't want to do.
Sure.
I love that.
Yeah.
So, Meridee, a question that I have for you, and I love that you talk about what can you do to give someone else value. In your opinion, what kind of process do you take to show them, like, hey, you want to go with me instead of this or that, but you kind of say it in a way of, I bring you value because of this way?
So how do you sell yourself in a relationship? It's funny, I think about it a little bit like dating. Our job is to help our clinicians shine in those online profiles. And the same way that I've helped friends craft their online dating profile, an accurate representation of their sparkling self, so that they find the right kind of people, because there's someone out there for everyone, but it's that match. And what happens on the client side is when they don't feel a match, the work doesn't go anywhere. And what is a match? Well, it's somewhat determined by the clinician. It's somewhat determined by the client, and it's the kismet that happens in there. So we focus a lot on trying to help clinicians sell themselves without talking about it as selling themselves, so that a client who would be a good fit for them will resonate with their bio, with how we talk about who that clinician is and how they work. One time I was answering the phones back in the day, and the client's telling me, I'm looking for this, this, and this. And I'm thinking to myself, like, oh my gosh, I wish I could see you, because I help with all those things. And then the client said, and don't give me a therapist who's really bubbly and talkative. I hate that. And I was like, oh my gosh, you would really hate working with me. I'm so glad you told me that, because that piece is really important in the relationship piece, because it's the energy between the people. Try and capture some of that so that a client feels that confidence coming in the door that this person has something to offer, which is helpful to the clinician too, because clinicians don't think about having to sell themselves as having something to offer. They feel like, I've got a master's degree. I'm fully licensed. I've done thousands of hours of supervised work at this point. I don't need to convince you. Like, I know things, but they do have to convince people that there's something they have of value to offer. So it helps when both sides are a little more confident coming into the relationship that they know what those things are.
Yeah. What I think is so awesome is that you recognized early on that your clinician is your customer just as much as your client. And, a lot of times business owners don't think of that. They think of maybe their customer as the end customer. And so, talk about, how do you go about treating your clinicians somewhat as customers in your business?
Yeah. Well, I think it's just an important recognition. And I don't know how true this is in other industries. So I can't speak to that. Like, I don't know if you switch out one accountant for another, do customers just keep coming to that accountant because they still provide a service? I don't know. But what I do know is when your healthcare provider leaves the practice, many people will follow their healthcare provider. If it is doable to continue seeing them, and in a world of telehealth and virtual visits, it is often doable to continue seeing them. So clinicians are not replaceable like that. It's easy to think about like, oh, okay, well, you leave and I have to hire someone else. But I cannot just assume that everyone that you are seeing, that you connect with, that you have a good vibe with, I can just dump onto someone else. And also, those clients will follow you. I used to tell clinicians years ago, like when my hairstylist left and went to another salon, I drove an hour and a half to keep going to see that hairstylist. I didn't care what salon she was at. Like, I was going to see her. And when I think about what that's like in healthcare, like it is that relationship and trust you build with someone. And so it's meaningful to keep that clinician there because they are not replaceable and clients don't see them as replaceable. So it doesn't make sense for us to see them as replaceable either, even though technically I can probably fill that office with another clinician, but I'll be
Sure.
starting from scratch with them. I have worked in organizations. I know the things that felt really good to me to experience in those organizations. I know the things that felt bad. And I think that's true for all of us. We have other experiences in our life that put us in other institutions, and we know what things feel good and what doesn't feel good. And it sounds stupidly simple, but like, do the things that feel good, do the things that people like. It's just hard to go wrong with that sometimes.
Wow,
Well,
that's such a
and
simple message to just,
yeah.
do what you like. And we've talked before about focus on your strengths and you can't lose. So as a leader, how do you do that? How do you help your clinicians be the best version of themselves and operate within their strengths?
Yeah. I think seeing those things in other people is really helpful and telling them. I mean, who doesn't like hearing from someone else, you are amazing at blank? And just as a life philosophy, I think we get a lot more traction when we focus on maximizing the things we're good at rather than trying to fill our deficits. And so, as an employer, I try and think a lot about how do we not focus on people's deficits? How do we be really understanding that everyone has the things that they suck at? Everyone has the things that are annoying about them. When that is most of the focus, that feels really bad. Even as we're talking about this thing that's difficult sometimes with people, it does not erase or diminish at all of the wonderful things that we hired them for, the ways that we know they're showing up with clients. So I think that matters.
Your organization has grown exponentially very quickly, actually. And, our audience is made up of business owners and business leaders that are wanting to grow their businesses. But one thing that happens when it starts to grow and you add 80 people is that culture changes. And so, how do you, as a business owner and leader, make sure that the culture that you started maintains throughout your growth?
Yeah. So years ago, I had a lot of stress about this as we were opening our second location. And I said, I don't want the culture to change. And he said, Meridee, it's going to change. I was like, whew, okay, let me just sit with that because it's true. It does change. And I try and focus on holding on to the things that we can hold on to and maximizing the things that are benefits of being a bigger place. Trying to hold on to people getting to know each other, personally and professionally, and having people that they could go to and not feeling like they're lost in the infrastructure of everything big, and having the access to lots of people with lots of perspectives and knowledge and network and the benefits that come from that. I will also say, as you get bigger, there's more and more pull for people asking to have policies about things. And it feels more and more irresponsible to tell people, we don't have a policy about that. We trust you. You consult with your colleagues. And if you come to a thoughtful, well-reasoned decision and somebody calls you on it, I'll back you up. Trust that people will do that if left to their own devices, that they will be mature, responsible adults, and that sometimes they'll not get it wrong, but they'll do something. I'll be like, oh, I kind of wish I'd done it a different way. And that then you will provide a safe landing place for that and think with them about like, how do we learn? How do we do it differently? How do we maybe help other people know like what your decision was and how you would do it differently? And so I think that there's a lot of pull towards systematizing and bureaucracy as you get bigger that I actively fight against. And there's a lovely book that I just checked before I logged in here. It was published in 2020, so it's relatively recent, called Humanocracy, that is all about rethinking the bureaucracy of large organizations. And it really resonates with me. It's very self-serving that it resonates with me.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'm not the only one who feels this.
Yeah.
Well, I think what's awesome, so a lot of the work we do with businesses is to help them find the right culture and governing structure, and systems and policies that line up with kind of the value they provide to their customers. And so what I'm hearing you say is, if you're going to give individualized solutions to customers and you need to empower your clinicians to be able to do that, too many rules are going to shut that creativity and that problem solving ability down. And so it's important for business owners to know that even as you grow, having too many rules may not be the right structure for you. And so it sounds like you've really learned that intuitively. In Unstoppable, we talk about if you're going to make any big change, which growing a business exponentially like you are is big change, right? You need to have a strong foundation. And so what you're describing is that you're bringing leaders in and helping them to understand your heartbeat, your mission, your vision, your values, your why, and then giving them some guardrails around here's some things that we have to do this way or that way, but everything else within that is free for you to discover. And I think that leaders can take a lifetime to discover that. And Meridee, I'm so inspired how you are just naturally a leader that understands that.
It's a constant evolving and rediscovering.
Yes.
I mean, I have really come to recognize that sometimes I have a strong and clear vision for how things should be sometimes. And I realize that like my job sometimes is to recognize that like, okay, yeah, it was happening and now it's not happening. But that also isn't a problem. It's just the natural course of humans being humans, is that it's hard for us to focus on all the things all the time. So sometimes we focus on this thing and it gets really tightly dialed in and it's working really well. And then we focus on this thing and then this thing starts to like veer off because we aren't looking at it. So then we look at this thing again, and kind of keeping those things like within the guardrails and allowing it to expand sometimes
Yeah.
too.
Awesome. Yeah. As leaders, that things like that come naturally to us, and we don't always think about that they may not come naturally to new people coming in. But it sounds like you have really institutionalized people and culture within your organization in a way that is really powerful.
One of the things I was going to say, Tyler, as you were talking earlier, is we get a lot of requests from unlicensed people to work with us. They love our values. They love our mission. We tried it, hiring some unlicensed people. They're wonderful humans. They did great work. So if you're listening, I adore you. What I tell people now is we are not a great training site. And the reason is because our staff is so autonomous that I don't know what hours they're in the office. I don't know when they're available to people. When I think about what a good training site is, as someone who doesn't yet know what they're doing, is you want to do the thing and then have someone who's somewhere down the hall that after you do the thing, you're like, was that okay? Should I have done that differently? When they said that, what else could I have said? And I think they're intentionally having to seek it out, which is fine. It just puts a lot of responsibility on the person who doesn't yet know what they don't know. And I think when you work around a lot of other people, and so I think a lot about the newest generation, what it's like for them coming into a workplace where work is much more autonomous and much more hybrid than it was before. How do you find the people who really impress you that you go to because you trust them to give you answers that are going to resonate with you? How do you find the people that want to invest in you? And so they come and they tell you about that training that they heard about, or, hey, I want you to meet so-and-so. And that's what I was finding for our unlicensed folks, is they were doing the work and they were showing up for supervision, but they didn't get that immersive experience that I would want for them. And I couldn't feel good enough about offering that to people and saying that that's the training experience to learn. I don't know what it would have been like for me as an unlicensed person, not knowing what I was doing, to have been learning in that environment.
Meridee, you have really focused on getting to know who you are and who you want to be and who you don't want to be. And you have formed your organization around that. And what I heard was it's really around people and culture, and making sure that as you're continuing to grow as an organization, that you're maintaining the people and culture that can deliver the value. So that's just really inspiring to me to see that you have really started to change the way the industry approaches providing mental health services to people through taking care of your clinicians. And, I remember reading a book a long time ago that said, take care of the people and they'll take care of the customers. And that was so revolutionary at the time, because it was always about, think about the customer. But that's so true. If you have people who, number one, know who you are and why you exist, and you have built a culture and systems and processes that allow them to be their best versions of themselves, they're gonna ultimately take care of the customer, which allows you to scale. My final parting question to you is like, what's your key takeaway, having like looking back on your journey? What are some things that you've learned as a leader, and what do you want to leave our audience with?
I am a voracious consumer of information. One of my clinical specialties when I did more clinical work was I was a couples therapist. And in particular, I loved working with high conflict, difficult couples. And one of the key takeaways from couples therapy that I think translates so well into being a leader and supporter of people is the importance of hearing the other person's perspective and taking it seriously and going into a conversation with the assumption of good intention, with remembering what's good about the person. They're not the enemy, they're my partner. I can't expect them to listen to my perspective if I'm not willing to listen to their perspective. The more I can give credence to their perspective and actually get to an aha moment where I'm like, that's why you do the thing you do. Now I understand the why, and it makes it easier to tolerate the what, even if the what never changes. You're seeing the world one way and someone else is seeing the world another way. And it's not trying to convince them to see the world your way. It's being able to understand how they see the world. And hopefully they can understand how you see the world. And then somewhere in there is figuring out like, okay, so now what do we do? And I work on that every day. I read books that make me uncomfortable. I say yes to things that make me uncomfortable. I, listen to perspectives that I don't immediately agree with. And I try and figure out like, what are the nuggets that I can understand about this, just to like flex that muscle of getting more comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Unstoppable. I know this episode left me inspired. I hope it left you inspired and maybe ready to take that first step, face some challenge, start getting unstuck, and start to make some desired change happen in your own life, in your business, in your community. Here at Vision One, we are passionate, and we're passionate about helping business leaders, business organizations, communities in effectively navigating critical change, such as growing your business, getting your business ready to exit, getting yourself ready for your next chapter, transitioning to the next generation of leaders. Imagine having a team that's working beside you every step of the way, providing strategic planning, fractional finance services, resources, operational services, HR services, and that it's tailored for you. That's what Vision One High Performance offers. So if you're interested in learning more about how we can help you get unstuck, be unstoppable, take those steps to make big changes, let's connect. And it might be through an unstoppable peer group, maybe a retreat, maybe an internal workshop. But I invite you to check out our website, visiononeperformance.com, and let's start the conversation.